There are some common concerns that people have when getting started in a regular practice of listening to Sacred Acoustics recordings. So I'd like to address some of those here. Now keep in mind these again are suggestions, and some of these tips may work for you and some may not. So feel free to try different things and find out what works best for you. Most of our Sacred Acoustics recordings include both a verbally guided version and a non-verbally guided version. Now we include both for a few reasons. The most important reason is that our listeners seem to have a strong preference for one or the other. Some of you very much prefer non-verbally guided versions, and others of you very much prefer verbally guided versions. And so we include both by default. Now, if you're someone who really enjoys those non-verbal versions, that's great. Listen to those as much as you wish. But we do encourage you at least once to listen to that verbally guided version. This will give you an idea of our motivation behind making the particular frequencies and kind of an idea of the flow of those different frequency sets. And once you've listened to it, you don't need to listen to it again unless you enjoy it. But keep in mind that we don't have constant verbal guidance throughout any of our recordings. It is always preferred to speak just for 1 to 3 minutes, maybe at the most, and then long periods of silence. So don't be concerned that you will have constant chatter coming at you. Now, those of you who prefer the verbally guided versions, we encourage you at least once to try those non-verbal versions. Now, the verbally guided versions are great if you're used to having that anchor of a voice to guide you, but the non-verbal versions really give you a chance to escape completely from that linguistic mind. And while listening to non-verbal recordings, you can follow the same kind of instructions that you remember from the verbally guided versions, or work in something of your own, another spiritual practice that you may have, a breathing pattern or perhaps a phrase that you repeat, some sort of mantra. Feel free to try that while listening to those nonverbal versions. But those nonverbal versions can really give you a different experience than the ones when you're being guided, and are very useful when applying your own unique intention. We have another video that explains intention in more detail, but those nonverbal versions are very good for that. So I encourage all listeners to try both at least once, find what works best for you, and continue listening. Sacred Acoustics recordings are specifically designed to get the listener into a hypnagogic or hypnopompic state. Now, these are states that we are all in every single day, hopefully at least twice, when we're first waking up in the morning and when we're falling asleep at night. That's that state sort of between awake and asleep, when you're still kind of relaxed, but maybe you're remembering some dream fragments, or sometimes at night, maybe you're reviewing things that happened during the day, just kind of that soft mind wandering. That's the state we're trying to achieve. And so some people will naturally just fall asleep. They won't be able to maintain that awareness. They'll simply just fall asleep. And this can be kind of frustrating for those of you who are trying to generate some type of experience to simply fall asleep. There's a few things you can try. First, try a different time of day to listen. If you're listening at a time when you naturally fall asleep, say maybe at a time when you might normally take a nap in the afternoon, or when you're very tired at night before you fall asleep, maybe that's not the best time to listen. You might want to try listening first thing in the morning, which is good for anyone, but especially if you fall asleep easily, because you're already well rested in theory, and you won't be as easily falling asleep. Now, another thing you can try is while you're listening, at the start of your listening session, hold your arm up like this. And as you start to fall asleep, your arm will naturally fall, and this usually has the effect of sort of jolting the listener back to their awareness. And so you want to practice and find that balance. Another thing you can do is don't listen in the place where you normally would go to sleep. So since we recommend lying down, many people choose their bed. And for those of you who can stay awake, that's great. But if you're falling asleep, try to change your position to maybe a recliner where you're sitting up, maybe lay on a couch where you don't normally fall asleep, or even a guest bed. Try different ways of holding yourself so that you can still stay relaxed, but not fall completely asleep. And repeat listening is also another way to combat this. A lot of times, just over time, it might take weeks, but over time, your body learns to allow the physical part to fall asleep while your awareness can still stay alert. So don't give up. There are many things to try if you're simply falling asleep, and see what works best for you. Many of our listeners are initially attracted to Sacred Acoustics recordings because of the claim that it helps to reduce that annoying mind chatter that so many of us have going on when we try to establish a practice of going within. Now, some of our listeners, as if by a miracle, will listen to our recordings and immediately the thoughts go away and they're quite pleased. Now, others have mixed results. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And others find it doesn't really reduce that mind chatter as well as they'd like. And so there's other techniques that you can try simultaneously while listening. Now, one of these is very commonly recommended in many other meditative practices, and that is to pay attention to your breathing. Your breathing is going on without you being consciously aware all times during the day. So when you notice those distracting thoughts, move your attention to whatever is going on with your breathing. So just pay attention to inhale, exhale, whatever pace is occurring. And additionally, you can add a phrase. We do include in nearly all of our verbally guided versions a phrase, let go. Now you can use any phrase, but we recommend inhale, let, exhale, go. Match that phrase with your breath. And so combining those two can be very useful to distract you from those thoughts. Now, that awareness is very interesting because the part of you that is noticing the distracting thoughts, that can be called your inner observer. Now, your inner observer can be very useful because these thoughts, even if they're continuing, your inner observer can simply choose to ignore them, can simply choose to not listen to them. And that is where the magic starts to happen. When the thoughts can be occurring in the back of your mind or wherever else, but your other awareness, your inner observer, can be attending to other things with its attention. So attention to intention can be very useful. And again, there's another video on our series that addresses intention. But another thing that you can try is to just simply stop being concerned if those thoughts are taking place and use the opportunity to allow your thoughts to drift. And when that occurs, very often people find that creative inspiration will come through, or solutions to problems that they couldn't think of in their normal everyday space. So never be concerned that you're doing it wrong, that something isn't happening the way it should. You can always take advantage of any opportunity of going within, no matter what your thoughts are doing. And so hopefully some of these tips will help you. And if, as always, you have further questions, or even if you have some tips for us that have worked for you, please feel free to reach out to us at sacredacoustics.com.